You realize by the time Caitlin's out of college, it'll be like the year 2027 or something?
She takes after you. She won't be out of fourth grade by then. Plus, by that time, she'll be working here, so who gives a shit?
That should have ended in violence. We have seen Christopher attack people over less. He shot that annoying bakery worker because he disrespected him. He threw little Paulie through a window over stolen power tools. He even walked into the bada bing carrying a gun because he believed Tony had slept with Adriana. Anger usually reaches Christopher before he has enough time to think about consequences. Paulie has just spoken about his infant daughter growing up to become a stripper. Every man around the table is laughing, and Christopher simply looks at them before walking away. It is one of the strangest reactions Christopher has in the series, and one that I never expected. I was waiting for him to do something, and he did nothing. This is also a world where insults involving wives and daughters have caused beatings, murder plots, and conflicts between entire families. Johnny Sack nearly started a war over one joke about Ginny's weight. Tony almost killed Coco with his bare hands after Coco made a sexual comment toward Meadow. The men in this room understand exactly how serious these boundaries can become. So why does Christopher accept it? And what would have happened if he had stood up and punched Paulie in the face? Would Tony have understood that Paulie crossed the line? Would the others support Christopher as a father? Would Paulie be forced to apologize? Or would Christopher be punished for attacking an older made man after Tony had already ordered them to settle their problems? A single punch probably would not have gotten Christopher killed. Anything beyond that could have placed his life in serious danger. By this point in the series, Christopher's rank offers him far less protection than he believes. His relationship with Tony is deteriorating, the crew sees his sobriety as weakness, and Paulie has the seniority, allies, and confidence to humiliate him in front of everyone. Christopher walks away because he looks around that room and understands something immediately. The joke is aimed at his daughter. The consequences would fall entirely on him. To understand why, we have to look at what happened before the joke. Paulie's crew steals power tools from Christopher's father-in-law. Christopher takes it personally because it happens through his family. He responds by throwing little Paulie through a window, leaving him with serious injuries. Paulie retaliates by driving across Christopher's lawn, destroying the landscaping while Kelly and the baby are inside. By the time Tony steps in, both men have crossed several lines. Still, Christopher ends up carrying more of the blame. Tony forces him to contribute toward little Paulie's medical bills, and Christopher has to make peace with Paulie. The message is clear. Christopher's anger created the bigger problem. Paulie's theft and retaliation become part of the usual business mess. That settlement matters because Paulie makes the joke after Christopher has already been ordered to calm down. Christopher has apologized. He has accepted Tony's ruling, he has returned to the room, and tried to act like everything is finished. Paulie knows Christopher cannot react without reopening the conflict and making Tony feel disobeyed. The drinking makes Christopher even easier to dismiss. Everyone knows he is an addict. The moment he picks up a glass, his credibility disappears. Any complaint can be blamed on alcohol. Any anger can be called another relapse. Paulie can say something vicious and still describe Christopher as the unstable one if a fight starts. Paulie keeps pushing because the room is safe for him. He first jokes that Caitlin may be adopted. Christopher corrects him. Paulie makes fun of Christopher's intelligence and says his daughter will still be in fourth grade by the time she should finish college. The men laugh. Paulie sees that Christopher is trapped, so he takes the joke one step further and says she will probably be working at the Bing anyway. That final line turns Christopher's happiest subject into something filthy. He is speaking with pride about his baby. Paulie imagines her as a future stripper working in a club controlled by the same men sitting around the table. He says it directly to her father and receives laughter from the entire room. Tony's laughter is what truly kills Christopher's reaction. Christopher spent years chasing Tony's approval. He killed for him, lied for him, and gave up Adriana for him. He convinced himself that all of those sacrifices secured a permanent place inside Tony's family. Yet when Paulie humiliates his daughter, Tony is enjoying the joke with everyone else. Christopher could punch Paulie, but the punch would also challenge Tony. Striking Paulie would tell the boss that his peace agreement meant nothing and that Christopher still believes his private anger outranks Tony's authority. That is why one punch would become much bigger than one punch. The first few seconds would be chaos. Paulie would fight back immediately. Christopher is younger, but Paulie has survived his whole life by reacting quickly and viciously. The others would rush in to separate them. Christopher would probably receive several extra shots while they pulled him away, because most of the men in that room are closer to Paulie and already see Christopher as the problem. By the next morning, the story would have changed. Paulie would say they were breaking balls. Tony would say Christopher was drunk. Sylvia would focus on the fact that Christopher attacked a made man in front of the boss. Nobody would repeat the joke with the same ugliness Christopher heard in the moment. Christopher would explain that Paulie spoke about his infant daughter. A few of them would understand. Some might even think he had every right to be furious. Their sympathy would stay private. Publicly, they would protect the hierarchy. The likely punishment for one punch would be money. Christopher could be taxed, ordered to cover Paulie's medical costs, or forced to hand over part of an operation. Tony might take work away from him and give it to Paulie. Christopher would almost certainly have to apologize. That apology would be worse than the payment. He would stand in front of the same men who laughed at him and show respect to the man who insulted his daughter. Paulie would accept it, pretend everything was settled, and spend months telling people that Christopher became emotional over a joke. Paulie would also find quieter ways to retaliate. He could take money from Christopher's crews, interfere with his business, insult his sobriety, or target people around him. Tony would order both sides to stop, although Paulie would have more freedom to keep the conflict alive through small attacks that were difficult to prove. Christopher would probably survive a single punch. A serious beating changes everything. If Christopher knocked Paulie down and kept hitting him, broke bones, or ignored everyone trying to pull him away, Paulie would demand his death. He would frame the attack as open disrespect toward a senior-made man. He would remind Tony about little Paulie, the lawn, the drugs, the alcohol, and every other incident that made Christopher look uncontrollable. Earlier in the series, Tony may have protected Christopher without much debate. Near the end, Tony is tired of him. He resents Christopher's sobriety because it keeps him away from the group. He hates the movie because he sees Christopher's anger toward him inside it. He worries that Christopher's addiction could bring the authorities to their door. Every emotional crisis has become another burden Tony has to manage. A brutal attack on Paulie would give Tony an excuse to remove Christopher while pretending the decision was about order. Silvio might argue for a financial punishment if Paulie survived without permanent damage. Bobby could understand Christopher as a father, especially after hearing exactly what was said. Patsy would likely keep his opinion to himself. Most of the crew would wait to see what Tony wanted and adjust their morality around that decision. Paulie would push hardest for blood. He has never forgotten a humiliation in his life. Christopher beating him in front of the entire crew would become something Paulie could never live with. He would keep demanding action until Tony either punished Christopher severely or allowed Paulie to settle it himself. Christopher's survival would depend on how badly Paulie was hurt and how useful Tony still considered Christopher. If Christopher used a weapon, his chances would collapse. Pulling a gun on Paulie in front of Tony would look like rebellion. The insult would become secondary. The room could kill Christopher before he had time to explain himself. Even if he escaped, Tony would authorize his death. This may sound extreme until we remember how often violence involving family insults appears in the series. Johnny Sack hears that Ralph joked about Ginny's weight and immediately wants Ralph dead. He asks Carmine for permission. Carmine refuses because Ralph earns too much money. Johnny refuses to let the insult disappear. He beats Donnie K for laughing, arranges an unauthorized hit, and nearly creates a conflict that could have killed several people. Johnny has more power than Christopher. He is the underboss of New York. He has political influence, respected allies, and the confidence to bring the issue directly to Carmine. Even with all of that power, he cannot receive permission to kill Ralph because business matters more than his feelings. Christopher would receive less. He could request a sit-down. He could ask Tony to tax Paulie or force an apology. Tony might agree that the joke crossed a line, though the punishment would probably be small. Paulie earns, Paulie has seniority, and Tony has already decided that Christopher is exhausting. The crew's rules about wives and daughters only become powerful when a powerful man invokes them. Tony proves this when Coco approaches Meadow. Coco touches her face and makes a sexual comment. Tony tracks him down and nearly kills him with a curb stomp. He does not request permission. He does not wait for a meeting. He reacts as Meadow's father and forces everyone else to deal with the consequences later. Tony gets away with it because he is the boss of New Jersey. Coco belongs to another family, and Tony has enough power to make his anger everyone else's problem. New York may be furious, but nobody inside Tony's crew will tax him or make him apologize for defending Meadow. Christopher has none of that protection. Paulie belongs to his own family. Tony is present. The insult is verbal. Christopher has a captain's title, but the title has become almost completely empty. That is one of the cruelest parts of the scene. Christopher has spent his life believing that being made would protect him. He wanted the respect, the money, and the right to stand beside Tony as family. He reaches that position and discovers that rank means little when the boss no longer likes you. The men at the table would understand why he reacted. Many of them would react the same way if the joke involved their own daughter. Silvio would probably confront Paulie more carefully. Bobby would demand respect without turning the room into a war. Patsy might stay quiet and remember it for later. Their methods would differ because their positions are more secure. Christopher has no calm way to respond that would preserve his pride. If he laughs, he accepts the humiliation. If he complains, they call him sensitive. If he punches Paulie, they call him unstable. If he keeps attacking, they may kill him. So he leaves. The violence still has to go somewhere. Christopher drives to JT Dolan's apartment and tries to talk. JT refuses to listen and tells him that he is in the mafia. Christopher shoots him. That murder is connected to the joke because it shows how violence moves through the hierarchy. Paulie humiliates Christopher because Christopher cannot safely punish him. Tony laughs because Christopher cannot challenge the boss. Christopher goes to someone beneath him and unloads everything there. JT dies because he is the only person in Christopher's life with less protection than Christopher has in that room. This is why Christopher's silence feels so wrong and so believable at the same time. His history tells us that he should attack Paulie. His position tells him that attacking Paulie could cost him everything. One punch probably leads to a fine, a forced apology, and another loss of status. A severe beating could lead to a death sentence. A weapon almost certainly gets him killed. The men may understand him privately, but they would follow Tony publicly. Paulie would demand punishment, and Tony would decide based on business, hierarchy, and how tired he had become of Christopher. Christopher gave this family Adriana. He gave them his loyalty, his violence, and his life. When he needs one small boundary around his daughter, he looks around and sees laughter. That is why he walks away. He finally understands that the family will protect Paulie's position before it protects Caitlin's dignity, and if Christopher tries to change that with violence, the family may punish him for caring.